She told me to forgive her cheating son, but I couldn't stop thinking about her own husband. My mother-in-law, Patricia, is sitting on my beige sofa, clutching a cup of tea like it's a lifeline, looking at me with those pleading, watery eyes that usually make me cave. She's telling me that marriage is a marathon, that men make mistakes, that Matthew is torn apart by what he did. She's using all the classic lines, the ones about duty, about history, about how throwing away 10 years is a tragedy. "He loves you, honey," she says, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He just lost his way. We women, we have to be the strong ones. We have to be the ones who hold the family together when the men falter." I'm sitting there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, feeling the cold leather of the armchair against my skin. And I realize I'm not really hearing her anymore. I'm looking at her perfectly coiffed hair, her manicured nails, the diamond ring on her finger that she's twisted nervously for 30 years, and a thought blooms in my mind, dark and heavy. I'm thinking about the rumors, the whispers at family barbecues I was never supposed to hear. The way her husband looks at her when he thinks no one is watching. She thinks she's saving my marriage, but she doesn't realize she's standing on a landmine. And I'm about to step off the pressure plate. I should probably back up just for a second so you understand who is sitting in this chair. I'm 32, living in a suburb of Chicago that prides itself on manicured lawns and quiet neighbors. I work in digital marketing. I pay my taxes. I walk my dog at 6 a.m. every morning. I'm not the kind of person who blows up relationships. I'm the person who fixes them. I'm the peacemaker. The one who smooths over awkward silences at Thanksgiving. The one who remembers birthdays. For a decade, I defined myself by being Matthew's wife, by being a good daughter-in-law, by fitting into the mold of a successful, happy young professional. But right now, that version of me feels like a stranger, a ghost I left behind in a doctor's office 3 weeks ago. I'm currently sleeping in the guest room of my own house, surrounded by boxes, trying to navigate a divorce that half my family thinks is hasty and the other half thinks is overdue. I'm not dramatic by nature, but trauma has a way of rewriting your personality, of sharpening your edges until you cut anyone who tries to handle you too roughly. Before the bomb went off, our life was painfully normal, almost boring in a way I cherished. We had the Friday night pizza tradition, the Sunday morning coffee on the porch, the shared Google Calendar for managing our busy weeks. Matthew was, or I thought he was, my best friend. He's an architect, charming, reliable, the kind of guy who helps old ladies with their groceries. We talked about having kids next year. We were looking at bigger cars. We were planning a trip to Italy for our anniversary. The house was filled with our shared history. Photos from our wedding on the mantle, his gym bag by the door, my books on the nightstand. It felt solid. It felt real. I trusted him with my life, with my secrets, with my future. I never checked his phone, never questioned his late nights at the site, never doubted him when he said he was just tired. I was living in a beautiful glass house, completely unaware that he had been throwing stones at the walls for years, waiting for the whole thing to shatter around me. The shattering didn't happen with a text message or a lipstick stain. It happened in a sterile exam room with white walls and the smell of antiseptic. I went in for a routine checkup, nothing major, just a standard annual appointment. Then the doctor came back in, looking uncomfortable, holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield. She asked if I had any new partners, and when I laughed and said, "No, I've been married 10 years," she didn't smile back. She told me I tested positive for something that doesn't just appear out of thin air. I remember the room spinning, the sound of blood rushing in my ears like a freight train, the feeling of the paper gown crinkling as I gripped the edge of the table. I walked out of there feeling dirty, feeling contaminated, feeling a rage so pure and hot it scared me. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached, realizing that every "I love you" for the past year had been a lie wrapped in a biological hazard. I confronted him that night, expecting him to deny it, expecting him to beg. But the floodgates opened, and it wasn't just a trickle, it was a deluge. It wasn't one mistake. It wasn't a drunken one-night stand. It was apps, it was meetups, it was a whole separate life he kept in a locked folder on his phone. He had been seeing people during his lunch breaks, on those late nights. Even during a weekend he was supposed to be visiting his sick aunt. The sheer volume of the betrayal took my breath away. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a campaign of deception. He sat there on the edge of the bed, crying, saying he had a problem, saying he needed validation. I looked at this man I had shared a bed with for a decade, and I didn't see my husband. I saw a predator who had stolen my agency, my health, and my trust. The pain wasn't a sharp stab. It was a dull, crushing weight that settled on my chest and refused to move. How could someone you loved for years hide an entire universe of selfishness behind a smile? Filing for divorce wasn't a choice. It was a survival instinct. I couldn't look at him without feeling sick, without imagining him with them, without wondering what else he had lied about. I met with a lawyer quietly, moved my money, and put the house on the market in my head before I even told him. When I finally said the words, "I want a divorce," he looked shocked, like he thought I would just yell for a while and then go back to making dinner. My family was mixed. My sister was ready to slash his tires. But my parents were concerned about the optics. They worried about what the neighbors would say, about the shame of a failed marriage. But I didn't care about optics. I cared about the fact that I couldn't breathe in my own home anymore. I packed his bags myself, methodically, calmly, while he cried in the hallway. I was operating on autopilot, shutting down my emotions to get through the logistics of dismantling a life. That brings us back to Patricia, sitting on my couch, stirring her tea. She showed up uninvited this morning, letting herself in with the emergency key I forgot to take back. She didn't ask how I was, didn't ask about the doctor, didn't ask about my heart. She just launched into her speech about forgiveness. "You can't just give up," she said, her voice tight with judgment. "Marriage is work. It's not always sunshine and rainbows." She's talking to me like I'm a child throwing a tantrum over a broken toy, not a grown woman whose health was put at risk by her son's recklessness. I feel the anger bubbling up, hot and acidic, realizing she doesn't care about me. She cares about the image of her perfect family. She wants me to sweep this under the rug so she doesn't have to explain to her church group why her son is living in a motel. She's manipulating me, using my own pain against me, trying to guilt me into staying in a cage her son built. I look at her, watching her lips move, and suddenly a memory surfaces, clear as day. It was 5 years ago, Thanksgiving. I was in the kitchen helping her husband, Arthur, carve the turkey. He had had a few too many scotches, and he made a comment, something about Patricia knowing how to look the other way. At the time, I thought he meant about his drinking, or his spending. But now, looking at Patricia's desperate, almost frantic need for me to forgive Matthew, the pieces are clicking together. She's not just defending her son. She's defending her own life choices. She's defending the compromise she made 30 years ago. And suddenly, I know exactly what I need to say. I don't want to yell. I don't want to argue about Matthew anymore. I want to hold a mirror up to her and force her to look at what she's actually asking me to do. It's a cruel thought, maybe, but she came into my house to tell me my pain doesn't matter. So I figure all bets are off. I take a deep breath, pick up my own coffee mug, and interrupt her mid-sentence. "Patricia," I say, my voice calm, dangerously calm. "I have a question for you." She stops, blinking, caught off guard by the shift in my tone. "Of course, dear. Anything." I lean back, crossing my legs, looking her dead in the eye. "When Arthur had that affair with his secretary back in '98, the one everyone pretends didn't happen, did you forgive him because you loved him, or because you were too afraid to leave?" The silence that slams into the room is deafening. It sucks the air right out of the space. Her mouth drops open, just a little, her eyes going wide and panicked. She freezes, the teacup rattling slightly in its saucer. I didn't shout it. I didn't say it with malice. I asked it like a genuine question, which makes it infinitely worse. She starts to stammer, her face turning a splotchy, violent red. I don't know what you're... Who told you?" "Matthew mentioned it once," I lie. Smoothly, easily. "He said you guys worked through it, so I'm asking, Patricia, did you really forgive him? Or did you just decide that maintaining the lifestyle was more important than your dignity?" She stands up so fast, she knocks her purse off the couch. She looks terrified. Stripped naked in the middle of my living room. The composure, the wise matriarch act, it's gone. She's trembling, not with anger, but with the shock of being seen. She sputties something about me being cruel and disrespectful, grabbing her coat with shaking hands. She doesn't wait for an answer. She practically runs to the door, unable to look at me. She leaves without another word, the front door slamming behind her. I sit there for a long time, listening to the silence return. I don't feel guilty, which surprises me. I feel light. 2 hours later, my phone blows up. It's Matthew screaming. "What did you say to her? My dad is freaking out. Mom is locking herself in the bedroom. What the hell is wrong with you?" Apparently, Patricia went home and exploded. The repressed anger of 30 years. The denial she had carefully constructed. It all shattered because I pulled the loose thread. She confronted Arthur. He blamed me. They're fighting in a way they haven't fought in decades. I realized I didn't just reject her advice. I rejected her entire reality. I showed her that her sacrifice wasn't noble. It was a waste. And now their house of cards is falling down right alongside mine. I put the phone down, blocking Matthew's number for the night. I walk into the kitchen and pour the rest of the coffee down the sink. I'm shaking a little, the adrenaline wearing off. It wasn't nice. I know that. But she came into my sanctuary, into my trauma, and tried to colonize it with her own denial. I process the anger, the empowerment, and the sadness. I feel sorry for her, in a twisted way. She spent a lifetime swallowing poison and smiling, and she wanted me to do the same so she wouldn't feel so alone in her toxicity. But I also feel a fierce pride. I broke the cycle. I didn't just accept the script handed down to me. I rewrote it. I'm not going to be Patricia, bitter and anxious in a big house with a man who doesn't respect me. I'm going to be alone and broke and free. The next day, I go to work. I have to. I need the distraction. But even there, the tentacles of the situation reach me. I tell a coworker, a woman I trust, about the divorce. She looks sympathetic, but then she asks, "Are you sure? Men have needs. Maybe if you try counseling." It's everywhere. This pervasive idea that women are the emotional janitors of the world, expected to clean up the messes men make. My friends are split. Some saying, "Good for you." Others asking if I'm being too harsh. It highlights this bizarre societal pressure, this expectation that loyalty means enduring abuse. It makes me feel isolated, like I'm the crazy one for thinking that not cheating is the bare minimum requirement for a partner. Driving home, I start thinking about the concept of marriage itself. We vow, for better or for worse. But does worse include deliberate, repeated betrayal? I always thought I was traditional, that I would fight for my marriage until the bitter end. But I realize now that the vow is a two-way street. When he stepped out, he broke the contract. I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm leaving because I value the vow more than he did. I value the sanctity of it too much to stay in a mockery of it. It's a strange epiphany, realizing that divorce can actually be an act of respecting marriage by refusing to settle for a counterfeit version of it. I hear from my sister-in-law a few days later. She tells me the fallout at the in-laws' house is nuclear. Patricia is staying with her sister. Arthur is drinking at the country club every night. She tells me Patricia is claiming I ruined her life. It's fascinating, the mental gymnastics. I didn't ruin her life. Her husband did 30 years ago, and she did by staying. I just turned on the light, but there's a part of me that aches for her. She built her identity around being the good wife, the forgiving woman, and I took a sledgehammer to that identity. It's a reminder that the truth is destructive, that sometimes people prefer the lie because the lie is comfortable. The tension is palpable. I'm not just the ex-wife now. I'm the catalyst that exposed the rot in the entire family tree. I meet with my lawyer again. We finalize the paperwork. I start looking at apartments in the city. Smaller places, places with no yard to maintain, places that are just for me. I start seeing a therapist, a woman who tells me that my anger is healthy, that my reaction is normal. It's the first time in weeks I feel validated. I start building a wall around myself, not to keep people out, but to keep the nonsense out. I set boundaries with my parents, telling them if they mention reconciliation again, I will hang up. I start reclaiming my time, my energy. I realize I have a whole life ahead of me, a life where I don't have to worry about STDs or secret phones or lies. It's terrifying, but it's also exhilarating. The pressure ramps up one last time. Matthew's cousins start messaging me on Facebook, telling me I'm being vindictive for upsetting Grandma Patricia. My own aunt calls to tell me that God hates divorce. It's a chorus of people who are terrified of a woman who says no. They want me back in line. They want the boat steady. But I stand firm. I delete the messages. I block the numbers. I realize that their anger is about their own fear, their own compromises. If I can leave, if I can be happy, then what does it say about their misery? I'm a mirror they don't want to look into. I'm sitting here, recording this, looking at the empty shelves where his books used to be. And I want to ask you something. Seriously, would you have done what I did? Would you have confronted a family member about their own trauma to get them to back off? Some people say it was a low blow, that I weaponized her pain. Maybe they're right, but when someone is trying to drag you into the abyss with them, do you politely decline? Or do you kick them away to save yourself? I think about that moment on the couch, the look on her face, and I wonder if I was the villain, or if I was the only honest person in the room. I've learned a lot in the last month. I've learned that family isn't a free pass for toxicity. I've learned that self-respect has a price tag, and sometimes that price is being the bad guy in someone else's story. I've learned that empowerment isn't a hashtag. It's a grueling, lonely process of making decisions that hurt in the short term, but save you in the long run. I learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved, not your husband, and certainly not your mother-in-law. I don't know where Patricia is tonight. I don't know if Matthew is with one of his apps or sleeping on a friend's couch. And for the first time, I don't care. Some betrayals aren't just about the person who cheats. They reveal the cracks in everyone around them. They show you who is willing to look away and who is willing to burn it down to find the truth. I chose the fire, and looking at the clean, quiet space around me, I know I made the right choice. What would you do? Would you stay and forgive? Or would you ask the question that burns the house down?